I really did struggle listening to this repeated times, trying to find some redeeming value in it, but I just can't. This was horrendous. This is everything that I just don't want a rock album to be. Feeling a strong 0 to a light 1 on this one.
It was 3 years ago when one review for Green Day's latest album, Father of All, changed everything. You see, I was a hardcore fan of Green Day growing up. They were one of the first rock bands I truly ever got into, back when I was starting to develop my own music taste, rather than listening to whatever was big on the radio. There was no other band that I held close to my heart more than Green Day. Well, maybe aside from Linkin Park. So seeing this review a long time ago left me with the harrowing impression that the Green Day I knew and loved was gone for good.
Really, since Uno Dos Tres, the band has been in serious need of some direction, but I did not want that direction to be off of a cliff.
Yes, Father of All is a shit album. But if you personally enjoy that record, then that's perfectly fine. After all, it's nothing more than the opinion of some talking melon who just so happens to be an online music critic. But you have to keep in mind that Anthony Fantano is highly regarded to be one of the most popular music reviewers on the internet, and the 0 rating is one he does not give lightly to the albums he reviews. And when he does, it leaves quite a negative impression on these albums, and the musicians behind them, to the point where it's pretty much the ultimate mark of death for their careers. So when I watched Melon give Green Day the same score as Toads and I knew that my days of being a devoted fan of this band were coming to a tragic end. And so begs the question, what the hell happened here? Well, the first thing you should know is that this video isn't about Father of All. At least for now, although we'll get back to that later. To quote Matthew Fox from Lost,
"We have to go back. What we do here is go back.
Ah, 2017. Who doesn't get nostalgic for the days of 2017 when everyone on YouTube was literally getting demonetized for no reason? Now, back in my review for the Arcade Fire album Funeral, I briefly mentioned that my love of music heavily developed right around this year, when I shifted genres from pop to rock. Now, to be more specific, this musical transition started right around the month of March 2017. I had just turned 13 and 8th grade was over, summer had just begun, and my younger brother had started taking preschool classes. Also around this time, Ed Sheeran dropped Divide, Hugh Jackman played Wolverine for the final time in Logan, and the Nintendo Switch was finally released worldwide. And speaking of Ed Sheeran, this guy was among the artists that I used to listen to all the time through the radio, alongside other famous pop icons at the time like the Chainsmokers and Justin Bieber. Even a year prior, I received a really old iPad from my father that I essentially used to listen to music everywhere I went. And then one day I was browsing through a bunch of memes set to the tunes of Boulevard of Broken Dreams and In the End, and the rest is history.
I don't know how our next guests slipped past Secret Service, but we're delighted to have them here tonight. And here's what you need to know about this group. A wonderful, great, single-handedly keeping rock and roll alive. And their drummer, sure. And there's something wrong with their drummer. That's all you need to know.
All you need.
This is the new CD, American Idiot. Please welcome back Green Day.
Enter Linkin Park and Green Day. Right around this time, these were the first two rock bands that I ever listened to religiously. And while I love both of these bands equally, I'll be saving my thoughts on Linkin Park for another one of these videos in the future. But for now, I want to focus mainly on the legendary Californian pop-punk trio Green Day. So legendary, in fact, that they basically need no introduction. Now, for the casuals watching this video who don't know this band apart from Dookie and American Idiot, allow me to keep you up to speed. Let's start with a fun fact. Green Day didn't start out as Green Day. In fact, they actually started out as an underground punk rock band called Sweet Children in the East Bay of California in 1987. Founded by frontman Billy Joe Armstrong and bassist/childhood friend Michael Ryan Pritchard, aka Mike Dirnt, named after a nickname he got from grade school where he would pretend to play bass, or as I like to call it, air bass. Sweet Children started out as a four-piece, including bassist Sean Hughes and drummer Raj Punjabi. A year later, both Hughes and Punjabi left the band, with Dirnt primarily taking over bassist duties, and Punjabi's role was filled by John Kiffmeyer, who also played in another California-based punk rock band, Isocracy. What I'm trying to say is, Green Day used to be underground. Yo, you ever hear of this band called Green Day? They're so underground, you probably never even heard of them. They're hella underrated compared to your overrated mainstream Sex Pistols and Buzzcocks crap. After signing to Lookout Records, the band released their first ever EP, 1000 Hours, in 1989. By this time, the band renamed themselves from Sweet Children to the more recognizable Green Day, named after the band's love for weed, which basically means that the band's name is also a slang for smoking blunts. To further prove my point, a self-titled song from their 1990 debut album 39 Smooth emphasizes the meaning of the band's name further, with lyrical metaphors about smoking weed. In fact, Armstrong once joked in a 2001 interview that Green Day was the worst band name in the world, probably because he'd never heard of Saliva or the Butthole Surfers at the time. Green Day was one of the major players in the Bay Area punk scene of the 80s and the 90s, frequently performing shows at 924 Gilman Street in West Berkeley, or better known as simply Gilman. Shortly after the release of 39 Smooth and a bunch of EPs, Kiffmeyer left the band to take up university, being replaced by Frank Edwin Wright III, more well known as Trey Cool, previously having played for yet another punk rock band called The Lookouts. After Green Day transformed into the pop-punk band we all know and love today, they went back to work, releasing their sophomore album Kerplunk around the end of 1991. The album was a sleeper hit, having sold over 10,000 copies on its first day, all the way to an approximate 50,000 copies in the USA alone, and becoming Lookout Records' biggest release by then. In 2013, the album had sold over 4 million copies worldwide, becoming one of the most profitable underground punk rock albums of all time. This sparked a bidding war from major record labels to sign Green Day, which eventually led to the band signing with Frank Sinatra's Reprise Records, before going back to the lab to make their major label debut with legendary producer Rob Cavallo, who would later work with other big rock bands by the likes of My Chemical Romance, Shinedown, and the Goo Goo Dolls. Consequently, Green Day had been banned from 924 Gilman Street after signing to a major label, to the point where many of the patrons there, including the club's owner, had branded them as sellouts. Green Day would also go on to make songs based on this experience, such as 86 and Haha You're Dead. By late 1993, the band recorded their next album with Rob Cavallo at Fantasy Studios in Berkeley, California, paving the way for their breakthrough release, Dookie, released on February 1st, 1994. Mostly based around Billy Joe Armstrong's personal life at the time, Dookie proved to be an instant hit and a modern classic in the pop-punk scene, selling over 20 million copies worldwide and being certified diamond by the RIAA, even going as far as to winning a Grammy for Best Alternative Album in 1995. The album was promoted with 5 singles and topped the charts worldwide, hitting number 2 in the United States and even being a part of Rolling Stone's list of the 500 greatest albums of all time. Which, when you think about it, is pretty high praise for a pop-punk album.
That's high praise!
One could also argue that the popularity of this band and album were further propelled by their performance in Woodstock 94, which, while isn't as horrifically ill-fated as the next Woodstock festival 5 years later, is still just as well known for chaotic shit that happened during the live performances. In this case, a mud fight that had occurred at the end of Green Day's set list. Much like 99, the venue was filled with mud pits caused by rainy weather, culminating in one of the most notable moments from Woodstock 94. The mud fight that happened in Green Day's concert was, in fact, so insane and beyond control that Mike Dirnt got tackled by a security guard and lost one of his teeth, all because he had been mistaken as one of the fans attacking the band on stage.
Best part?
The best part is the atmosphere, definitely.
And the worst part?
The worst part? The mud, yes, definitely the mud.
Speaking of mud, it's also worth noting that the album got its title from diarrhea that the band members frequently suffered from while touring. To add insult to injury, they even considered calling the album Liquid Dookie, which if that title had been improved instead, then this would be an entirely different story. And it's funny, because despite the title literally referring to shit, the music on this album is anything but. So, without further ado, grab your pogs, put away the Tamagotchi, change the channel to MTV, and do other 90s things that happened way before I was born as we revisit the album that defined nearly every skater's childhood in the 90s, and the album that defined my music taste for many more years to come.
What's up, you fucking stupid motherfuckers?
By literally the first 5 seconds of the album opener, Dookie immediately tears down the wall like the Kool-Aid Man with Burnout, a song about, well, burning out. I Declare I Don't Care No More is the perfect opening lyric to start out your pop-punk album all about dozing off and just simply not giving a fuck about life. It's fast, it's intense, it's fun, and it's loud, to the point where it almost feels like Dookie's thesis statement about being bored and lighting up a blunt in your own room like nothing else matters. Musically, Burnout tells you everything you're gonna hear and love for the next 40 minutes, with Billy Joe singing about being apathetic and slacking off, while the band whips up some of the sickest guitar riffs in all of pop punk, and some kick-ass drumming thanks in part to Trey Cool. Hey, speaking of which, listen to this sick breakdown near the end. Right away, you'll understand why this album is so beloved by teen slackers and outcasts in the 90s, because of how much the music resonates with their love of the bite they get from grunge and alt-rock, with lyrics that relate to their teenage angst, and fusing them with the raw, no-holds-barred punk rock sound that made bands like The Clash and Ramones household names. And when you put them all together, you get the perfect recipe in the form of Dookie. It's merely more than the product of its time when most of the big rock songs on the radio were all about slacking off and not caring. This album's sound changed the pop-punk scene for many more years to come, and from this opener alone, it's very easy to see why. "17 years before Foster the People wrote Pumped Up Kicks, a fun indie pop banger about a school shooter, Green Day wrote a fun pop-punk banger about a suicide bomber. Both songs sound really fun to listen to until you really start to look further into the lyrics, and then you go, oh, that's fucked up. Still a banger though. As a matter of fact, this song isn't simply meant for shock value, as the lyrics are actually a metaphor for the anxiety that Billy had been going through after a breakup, and how he fears suffering an outburst that's just as explosive as a bomb. Even Billy has gone on record saying that this is a song about wanting to blow yourself up because you're going through some kind of torment. Once again, stuff you can't get away with these days, and probably for the best. It's a really cruel and angsty song, and ironically a fun one at that. It even gets very apathetic in the chorus too, a mood that pretty much goes on for the rest of Dookie. Expect a lot of apathy in the lyrics for this one. And here's something that I love about old Green Day that is really lacking from their recent music. Billy's vocals. If you listen to any of their music from 2004 onwards, you'll notice that he sounds a lot clearer, and ironically a lot younger despite the fact that he grows older and older with each passing release. It sounds drastically different from Billy's vocals on this album and their earlier works. I personally really love Billy's old vocal range here compared to new Green Day. It sounds like a nasal teenager singing some old garage tunes about how shit life is, which I think describes this album's vibes pretty well. The sound of this album is a lot more refined than 39 Smooth or Kerplunk, as this was Green Day's first album to be recorded in a professional studio. But it doesn't sound too refined, so it almost sounds just as raw and urgent as those two albums were, which adds another reason to why I love Dookie so much. You're gonna have a blast with having a blast, if that makes sense. To casual listeners, it's a pretty sick guitar riff, but to Green Day fans like myself, it probably sounds a lot familiar to you, and that's because this is actually a bit of a rework of 2,000 Light Years Away, the opening track from their previous album Kerplunk. But I guess it's technically not stealing if you're ripping off yourselves, right? Right? But whereas 2,000 Light Years Away was a cute punk rock love song about a crush, Chump is anything but. It basically sounds like what happens if you do fall in love with your crush, but she turns out to be a total asshole. Take a look at these lyrics, for example. If you're looking for a song that feels like a theme song centered around your worst enemy, then you've come to the right place. It's such an angry song directed towards the listener that it can really be about anyone. It could be about your parents, your ex-girlfriend, that bitchy classmate who dislikes you for no reason, Andrew Tate, and it can even be a song about how Green Day probably hates your guts.
Give me a fucking break. 1 minute left. 1 minute fucking left. You're gonna give me fucking 1 minute? You gotta be fucking kidding me! You fucking kidding me! What the fuck? Let me show you what 1 fucking minute fucking means. One minute. God fucking love you all. We'll be back.
I can joke all I want, but the best way I can describe Chump is that it's a hate song. The polar opposite of a love song. The guitar riffs make the song about 1,000 times cooler, and Billy's vocals really make the whole thing feel as if it's personal to him and straight from the heart. It's one of the most underrated songs from Dookie in my personal opinion, and it's just such a cool subversion of an otherwise cutesy and lo-fi deep cut from one of the band's earlier works. I also applaud the idea of remaking 2,000 Light Years Away into a hate song that best describes the band growing more and more cynical by the minute. And that goddamn bass solo! Woo! And so that kick-ass coda of the previous track immediately segues into the lead single off of Dookie, Longview. What a song to have as your lead single, to be honest, because this song is probably the quintessential track off of Dookie. Everything I love about this album is jam-packed into this one song that it almost feels like Green Day's own mission statement. Named after the city in Washington where Green Day performed one of their first shows, Longview doubles down on the album's themes of boredom, just being stuck in a room, smoking weed, binge-watching TV, and jerking off until it's no longer fun.
Smoking marijuana, eating Cheetos, and masturbating do not constitute plans in my book.
Some would even consider this as a masturbation anthem, especially by the chorus and some of the lyrics near the end. Just a fun fact I wanted to get out there for no reason. This video definitely isn't going to get demonetized at all. Where do I even begin? First, the intro. Mike Dirnt and Trey Cool have some of the coolest chemistry in mainstream pop punk, as you immediately hear Mike's sick bass riffs and Trey's drum fills go together like peanut butter and jelly. And as Billy comes into the mix, he sings about watching TV and just refusing to leave his room until magic happens. Another fun fact, this song was written while Mike Dirnt was on LSD, and there's a subtle reference to that in this killer bridge. Who would have thought that one LSD trip would pave the way to the national anthem for dozing off and jacking it? Definitely not me, that's for sure. Reaching number 1 in the Billboard charts and even being nominated for a Grammy, which is saying a lot for a song about jacking off to Pornhub, Longview still remains beloved in the hearts of many Green Day fans, including myself, and pretty much sums up everything great about this album in one single song. The second single off the album, Welcome to Paradise, is a re-recording of the song of the same name from Kerplunk, but with crisper guitars, refined vocals, and sounds like it was recorded in a studio compared to the original. That's right! Green Day re-recorded their own song before it was cool. This song is heavily dedicated to his mother, as it's rooted from Billy's personal experiences of moving out from her home to a crime-ridden shithole located somewhere in Oakland. At least it's not in Ohio. Dealing with themes of change, loneliness, and maturity, Welcome to Paradise is a song that any young adult coming of age can relate to, especially if you're moving into Ohio. Please don't move into Ohio. But whereas the original version was a lot more garage-like and lo-fi, the Dookie version is a lot more theatrical and squeaky clean by comparison. The guitars and vocals are much more refined here. Re-recording the song was a good call for Green Day, as this is the one song that I think really represented who and where they were during their first few years as a band. Long before they were super successful with their own musical and coffee brand of all things, Green Day was still young and broke, transitioning from the underground to the mainstream. It's a really uplifting rags to riches story for 3 punk rock boys from the East Bay just trying to make it big. Even the jam solo of this version is such a massive improvement over the original, showcasing how strong the band's chemistry is with each other through the way the bass, the drums, and the guitars all flow together really nicely. This continues to be one of Green Day's biggest hits nearly 30 years later, and for all the best reasons, as Welcome to Paradise welcomes you to all the awesome music this band has to offer, at least for most of their career. Pulling Teeth sounds like a chill pop-punk ballad upon first listen, with its laid-back vocals and guitar riffs compared to the previous songs on the album, until you read the lyrics and realize that this song is about domestic violence, or at least a darkly funny look at domestic violence. Back when domestic violence didn't plague our pop culture like the Black Death. Seriously, how hard is it for celebrities to just simply be good people these days? Which leads me to one of the things I really enjoy about Dookie, its dark sense of humor. Looking back, this album surprisingly has a dark sense of humor sprinkled all over its 14 tracks, especially in songs like Burnout, Having a Blast, and this track. In fact, Pulling Teeth was penned after Mike Dirnt was badly injured amid a pillow fight with his girlfriend at the time. Still not as bad as when, he actually got his teeth pulled out in the Woodstock mud fight. And I think Green Day weaves black comedy into their early stuff pretty freaking well, and adds a lot of personality and relatability to their music, in ways that other pop-punk bands fail to even replicate. Sure, a lot of rock bands in the 90s were already gritty and edgy in their own ways, especially in the grunge, pop-punk, and alt-rock scenes, as well as paving the way for the birth of nu metal, which, by the way, is one of the genres of all time. But what separates Green Day's bite from all the other bands of their time was that they were able to take the piss out of it in ways that anyone stuck in a shitty place could relate to. Kind of like how firefighters and police officers tend to do some dark comedy every now and then to deal with the heavy pressure of their jobs. Which brings us to what is considerably the main attraction of not just Dookie, but Green Day's entire career.
Do you have the time to listen to me whine?
This is Basket Case, the perfect introduction to Green Day. You know this song, even if you're not a fan of Green Day, rock music, or music in general. 29 years later, this song still remains one of the most legendary rock songs of the 90s, and perhaps Green Day's most popular song to date. More popular than American Idiot, 21 Guns, Boulevard of Broken Dreams, and Good Riddance combined. Fun fact, producer Rob Cavallo signed Green Day to Reprise after hearing a demo of this song, so it goes to show that this was destined to put them on the map. Not bad for a song that was allegedly written by Billy Joe while on speed.
I wrote these lyrics where I was actually on speed. When you're on speed and you write anything or do anything creative, you think that it's the greatest thing in the world. And then the next day when I saw the lyrics, I was just mortified. And I thought it was just, what the hell am I singing about?
What can be said about this song that hasn't already been said? It's a punk rock classic. It's certified platinum in several countries. It dominated 3 different Billboard charts at the time, ranked high on lists for the greatest rock songs of all time, and most special of all, remains a childhood classic to many who grew up with Green Day's music like myself. Basket Case is also regarded as one of the band's most personal songs, as it deals with frontman Billy Joe Armstrong's struggles with anxiety and panic disorder, once again in a rather fast-paced and darkly funny manner that this album has already established well thus far. In fact, despite the words basket case being nowhere to be found all throughout the song, it's titled that way to represent how the song is really about going crazy.
You're a batshit crazy basket case!
Do you have the time to listen to me whine? These opening lyrics are the very first thing you hear in this song, coupled with one of the sickest opening riffs of all time, all together making one of the most iconic openings to a rock song ever written that just pulls you right into the action. And then, BAM! Oh my god, those drums are just sick after the stick in, holy shit! I went to the string to analyze my dreams. Yeah, I also played air guitar to this song once. It was a lot of fun. I also really love the part near the instrumental solo where Billy Joe essentially flubs the lyrics. I think it adds a lot of personality and grit to this already perfect track and hammers home how this song is basically just this meme in musical form.
Go crazy! Go stupid! Go crazy! Go stupid!
Another thing I love about this song is how it's designed to make you go crazy. This shit is perfect for banging your head out or just losing all control at a party. I could talk for hours and hours about how much I love this song, but I feel like I've covered pretty much most of the highlights at this point. Whether this song makes you nostalgic for the 90s, gets you headbanging and playing air guitar, Basket Case is a fun, short but sweet pop-punk gem about going nuts that rightfully deserves its place as one of the most recognizable rock anthems of the 90s.
How come that guitar's in the hospital? Okay, you don't have to say anything. I asked you a question, but you know, that's okay.
Do you have the time to listen to me?
This looks like that movie, One Flew in the Cuckoo's Nest. Oh, yeah. That's that movie with all those dudes in Taxi, only they're retarded. You know, I think you're not supposed to call them retarded. You're supposed to call them, like, mentally superior or something. Oh, yeah. Remember that big Indian dude in that movie? Mm-hmm. He was cool. And then he couldn't talk unless he was talking about gum? Yeah. You know, I think you're not supposed to say Indian either. No way, really? Yeah. I think you're supposed to call them African Americans. This reminds me of that joke. It's like the guy goes to the psychiatrist and he says, "Doctor, my wife thinks she's a chicken." And the doctor says, well then why don't you choke her? Oh, yeah. That's pretty funny. Ah, boy.
According to a VH1 interview, this song made it onto Dookie after Billy Joe's ex-girlfriend had shown him a feminist poem, also named She. Billy then wrote this song and showed it to her in response. She answered back by dumping him and leaving for Ecuador. Billy answered back by including the song on the album, plus another song targeting her that we're gonna get to in a bit. This song would later go on to become a staple in Green Day's concerts, even one time where Billy performed the song dressed in his birthday suit. I'd show the photo, but I don't want to get demonetized or get this video blocked worldwide, so instead, here's some footage of Kyrie Maida going bonkers as compensation. She is one of the most underrated songs on the album, which says a lot given this was one of the final singles to come out of Dookie and didn't even get its own music video. Not only do these lyrics work well as a feminist anthem, paying homage to the original poem, but it also works well as sort of a sarcastic revenge song against Billy's ex-girlfriend, whichever you prefer. Going back to my opinion that this album has aged surprisingly well, I strongly admire how this album dealt with themes of feminism, shootings, mental health, and self-imposed lockdown the only way they could be tackled in the 90s, long before they became far more prominent topics in our society as the 21st century kicked in. All juxtaposed with, lyrics about slacking off and spanking the monkey. Again, classic Green Day stuff.
What made you decide to go with Warner Brothers as opposed to Columbia?
Guffin was in it too. Well, it was either Guffin and heroin or Warner Brothers and cocaine. So we chose the coke.
Coke rolls out.
My personal favorite parts of this song are when that loud, bombastic chorus kicks in, blending in well with the feminist themes of the song and giving the whole thing an explosive sense of urgency, while also being hella fun to listen to. It gets even better at the end too when that scream kicks in and all hell breaks loose. Also, can we just talk about how Mike Dirnt is easily top 5 bassist in pop punk? Like, this man can low-key cook! I really love how his bass is just so prominent, so smooth and satisfying to listen to throughout most of this album. He's a really talented bassist, and his musical chemistry with the rest of the band really helps in making Dookie such a special album to me, and many fans who grew up listening to this album front to back. As if the lyrics didn't already give the song's meaning away, Sassafras' Roots is all about wasting time. And I don't mean like wasting so much time where you fall into an existential crisis and reflect about what could have been, but more so about roaming around the house and having literally nothing better to do with your life. And just like She right before this one, this song is also targeted towards Billy's ex-girlfriend, according to a tweet he wrote back in 2011. This song is basically Longview Part 2. But whereas Longview music-wise was all about trying to escape the hellscape of being bored as fuck and jacking off all day, Sassafras' Roots feels like Billy just accepting his fate and inviting his ex-girlfriend to waste time with him. It's also a relaxing listen, contrasting to Longview's more fast-paced intensity. I really love how crisp these guitars sound, and Billy's restrained vocals that just really add to the song's overall chill vibes. I might be repeating myself at this point, but the instrumentation and the vocals really work as this album's strongest points. I suppose this song would be the perfect backdrop to lighting up a joint and locking yourself on the couch all day binge-watching anime. I mean, Green Day is called Green Day for a reason. Even if Green Day isn't really Green Day anymore, and they don't have Green Day anymore, they're still Green Day. When is Green Day anyway? April 20th? Can't be that subtle, right? The fourth single off Dookie, When I Come Around, is one of Green Day's most popular songs, and one of the more alternative rock-based tracks off the album. and it's a nostalgia trip for anyone who grew up in the 90s, or really anyone who discovered Green Day at a young age like me, and it has one of the best music videos in the band's entire career because it perfectly represents the vibe I get from listening to this song. I mean, there's Green Day fans out there who've walked on the streets late night to this song at least once in their lives, right? This song was also the second most popular single to come off this album besides Basket Case, and was reported to be one of their highest charting radio singles to date. Going back to what I said about the previous song being so chill and low-key, When I Come Around dials that to 11. It's simpler than any of the other songs off this album, yes, the guitar chords in particular, but it's just as effective as any of the previous songs on this album. And look, I'm not one to be super nostalgic about everything, but I can't help it, man. This song just screams nostalgia. This entire album screams nostalgia, even if I didn't grow up in the 90s. I suppose the album sounding like a cleaner version of an early Ramones record might be one of the reasons why this album is so nostalgic to so many people like me, that it almost feels indie to an extent. The lyrics are also a lot more positive and emotionally sensitive compared to other tracks on the album, dealing with Billy's sense for longing in a relationship, which probably means that this song was written sometime after the fallout he experienced with his ex-girlfriend. Or this was written before he met his ex-girlfriend, who knows. Overall, it's the most chill song on the album and remains a fan favorite even to this very day.
17 and strung out on confusion.
One of 3 songs on the album to clock in under less than 2 minutes. Coming Clean is a short but sweet autobiographical song dealing with Billie Joe Armstrong's bisexuality. I love how the lyrics and the riffs just immediately pull you into what's otherwise an upbeat and personal song about finding yourself and discovering your sexuality as you grow up. I gotta give credit where it's due to the lyrics for being so relatable and personal, especially when Billy hits this level of self-acceptance at the end. As a pansexual person myself, I can't stop myself from relating to this song no matter how many times I bop to this. And I also think it's just a fun song to listen to overall. I gotta say, man, Green Day was low-key cooking with those guitarists, man. They were cooking! This is once again another song on the album that I think was way ahead of its time, especially now that we live in a time where LGBT plus anthems by the likes of Sam Smith, The Neighborhood, and Lil Nas X are dominating charts and streaming platforms. It's pretty insane to me to think that a song like this even came out back in '94, because back then, LGBT plus songs coming from big musicians were just hard to come by compared to now. Also worth noting that this was about 4 years before the bisexual flag was even invented. Does this mean Billie Joe invented the gay anthem? Obviously not. I mean, YMCA by the Village People literally exists. But I can say they were definitely ahead of the curve when it came to gay anthems coming from a big name like Green Day. And including it on the same album, it has a song about spanking the monkey. Even though Green Day would also go on to drop one of their biggest hits with this lyric.
Well, maybe I'm the American.
And also this lyric. And also the entirety of Father of All. It's like they were trying to cancel themselves. Jesus. It's also a shame because this is one of the more underrated songs on the album. Way more underrated than the other ones, to be exact. And it's one of the most personal songs Billie Joe has ever written, dealing with his coming of age and his sexual orientation. But I digress. Even if Green Day isn't as punk rock as they used to be, dropping a song about Billie Joe's bisexuality decades before the rise of gay anthems, clocking in under 2 minutes, and ending up as one of the most underrated cuts from the album, will remain, in my opinion, one of the most punk rock things they've ever done. Enemy is Sleepus, roughly translated to English as Sleeping with the Buyer, is another hate song on the album, clocking in under less than 2 minutes, this time dedicated to an ex-friend of Billie Joe. The lyrics here depict Billy reuniting with an old friend from his past and realizing that maybe he's not the person he thought he was at all, or chances are his friend was a clean-cut boy who excelled in high school and ended up selling jenkem on the streets, whichever interpretation you prefer. I really don't know what else to say here, to be honest, but I do love the energy of this one. And I know it's not as sharp as some of the other songs on the album, but I still think this song kicks a lot of ass. I also love the bridge in particular, showcasing Mike Dirnt's bass and Billie Joe's riffs at some of their best on the entire album. It's short, but definitely the polar opposite of sweet. That's this song in a nutshell. In the End has gotta be one of my favorite cuts off Dookie. Strange choice to bring in a rapper and some electronica into the mix though. Sounds like nothing like any of the other songs off Dookie, but I think it's a banger anyway. I really love how angsty and badass this song is, and... Sorry, what's that? Oh, sorry. Wrong song. Let me try that again. In the End has got to be one of my favorite cuts off of Dookie. I love the anger and the intensity coming off this song. Those guitar riffs and drums just being so fast, they almost feel straight out of a hard rock or a heavy metal song, especially with yet another breakdown near the end. And the lyrics just essentially dealing with Billy Joe's inability to live with a stepfather. This isn't the last time Green Day would write a song dealing with his family, as once again they would write another song dealing with the death of Billy Joe's biological father 10 years later. Huh. Guess there's more parallels between these two albums than I thought. Even if these songs were clearly punk rock length, at least it shows where Green Day was coming from at the time, and these songs are still a lot of fun to listen to nonetheless. Also, just a reminder to all the haters that these three boys came from an underground punk rock club from the East Bay. So yes, they are in fact real punk rock. Or at least they were until Uno Dos Tres. Never again. Something's on my mind. The closing track off Dookie starts with nothing but an acoustic guitar, and feels a lot quieter compared to other songs off the album, with Billy Joe introducing the song about something on his mind. And then, this happens. F.O.D, an acronym for Fuck Off and Die, is the perfect ending to Dookie. The best way I can describe this song is that it's basically the musical equivalent to waking up and being a hater. I just love how unapologetic and ruthless these lyrics are, once again proving my point about how well this album deals with teenage angst in a way that other pop-punk albums can't. A lesson we still haven't learned, apparently. It's an explosion of emotions and riffs and lyrical fuck yous that feels like the culmination of everything and everyone Dookie has tackled thus far, whether it be Billy's stepfathers, ex-girlfriend, or really everyone who's rubbed him and his homies the wrong way. It's so angry, yet so personal. Aggressive, yet so fun to listen to. Which best explains Dookie in a nutshell. In my opinion, this is how you end your 90s pop-punk album.
Hi, I'm Tabitha Soren with MTV News. 1994 has been some year for Green Day. The Berkeley, California-based trio has sold over 3 million copies of its major label debut album, Dookie. And although some bands have jacked up ticket prices or, like Pearl Jam, decided to cancel their tours altogether, claiming it was impossible to keep ticket prices low, Green Day has just wrapped up a U.S. tour in which tickets cost only $7.50 to $15. At the last show of their tour, Green Day told us they weren't trying to one-up Pearl Jam. Here's more.
Green Day are accomplished hellraisers and thrive on concert energy. But at a recent gig, nothing they did seemed to spark a reaction.
So I was like thinking, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? I just took off all my clothes and got completely naked. And then that's the first time I ever done that. So, so I went out and I played completely naked for a song, and then people were like, whoa, and it was like, oh, okay. It's like, I'll tell you what, too, man, I'm a grower, not a shower, so.
Green Day's Dookie is an album that isn't just pivotal in the genre of pop-punk, but also all of rock music for the rest of the 1990s. And in a year where many new rock bands would see themselves rise to fame, Green Day was perhaps the most successful out of all of them. It's an album so influential that its impact eventually went beyond the musical landscape of the time and played a major part in popularizing the white suburban slacker archetype for the rest of the 1990s.
What exactly is your real name? Is it Beck? Were you christened Beck? All right.
Dookie would also go on to maintain its critical acclaim over the years, even going as far as being considered one of the greatest albums of all time. On the eve of its 20th anniversary in 2014, a Fuse article even considered Dookie to be the most important pop-punk album ever created. Also worth noting that some time after Dookie's release, Nirvana frontman Kurt Cobain had committed suicide on April 5th, 1994. Rock music was never the same again following his untimely death, especially when you see Nirvana as the most famous anti-heroes rock music ever had to offer at the time. That same day, Green Day had been performing at a nightclub in Seattle, unaware that the band would go on to carry the torch that Cobain had unintentionally left behind by becoming rock's next anti-heroes for the rest of the 1990s. And while I wouldn't consider Green Day to be the next Nirvana or anything, they sure as hell left their own cultural impact on millions of fans around the world, just as much as Nirvana did in their prime. Dookie became one of the most successful rock albums in the post-Nirvana world, a title the album still holds even after all these years later. Green Day would later go on to release a few more albums riding the coattails off of Dookie's success, starting with the brasher and darker Insomniac a year later. While that album wasn't as widely successful as Dookie, I still consider it to be an underrated gem in their catalog, containing a lot of the band's best material to date. 1997's Nimrod and 2000's Warning followed afterwards, proving to be far more experimental and mature in nature, with elements of ska, acoustic balladry, and folk music into the mix. And then came the album that changed Green Day's image forever, for better or for worse, with 2004's American Idiot. Truth be told, while I don't love that album as much as Dookie, I still consider American Idiot to be a pivotal album in the band's career, being far more theatrical and politically charged compared to their previous outputs at the time. And in a time where pop punk was one of the biggest musical genres of the early 2000s, American Idiot proved to be a smash hit, introducing a new generation to the band's music, and even paving the way for a stage musical based on the album. But whereas Dookie ushered in the rise of Green Day, American Idiot ushered in the fall. Green Day failed to replicate the success of American Idiot when they did a second rock opera album in 2009, 21st Century Breakdown, despite spawning some hit singles here and there. And the Uno Dos Tres trilogy in 2012 proved to be the band's lowest point creatively and commercially, with the last two albums in that trilogy being the musical equivalent to cinematic box office bombs. To make matters worse, 2012 would also be the same year Billy Joe Armstrong would enter rehab, following the infamous outburst he had at the iHeartRadio Music Festival. Thankfully, he recovered, and by 2015, the band would go on to be inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, and even returned to 86 when they held a surprise concert back at 924 Gilman Street, their first time there since signing to a major label. The following year, they released Revolution Radio, which proved to be a return to form for the band and was beloved by most fans, including myself. And then, they made their worst album yet. In early 2020, Green Day released what's arguably their worst album in their entire discography, Father of All Motherfuckers, featuring a marketing campaign that could only be described as cringe at best, an ugly album cover, and a garage punk sound that felt so dated and generic, you'd swear you were listening to Google Ad Music instead. You could make the strong case argument that Father of All nearly destroyed the band's reputation. So much so that fans began creating conspiracy theories that this was nothing more than a joke album that the band made to fulfill their record deal with Reprise Records. During the album's promotional cycle, another theory circulated that Green Day was also working on a far better sister album at the time, a theory that was later confirmed to be fake. By this time, I had matured and moved on from my Green Day fandom to focus on other bands, mainly those from the indie scene. And while I still held on to my love of the band's music and all of that special nostalgia I had for their songs, by the time Father of All came out and got all the flack it rightfully deserved, especially the 0 out of 10 rating it got from Anthony Fantano that I mentioned at the beginning of this video, I felt as if it signaled the end of an era. The end of an era when Green Day was the soundtrack to my youth. As over-exaggerated as this sounds, this review was the ultimate mark of death for my Green Day fandom. Green Day became a shadow of their former selves, and how they'll ever recover past this point in their career is beyond me. I could go on and on about Green Day's history and their rise and fall, but I feel as if this video is already dragging on too long. So instead, I'd like to shout out this 4-part retrospective video series from fellow YouTube music critic Crash Thompson. These 4 videos were pivotal in getting me into Green Day, and they're way more in-depth and critical into the band's history and music than this one video ever could be. So go check those videos out when you can.
It's more or less like pretty much every great rock star success story. Right place, right time.
But even if Green Day isn't the Green Day we all know and love anymore, That doesn't mean we can't go back and remember all the good times we had with their music. The band still made a lasting impact on rock music and pop culture simultaneously, and Dookie and American Idiot are still some of the most successful pop-punk albums of all time. Being young in 2017, I'd be lying if I didn't say I didn't know any better back then. Life was changing before my eyes, and I just had no idea how to adapt to all these changes happening within my society. And so diving back into the music of Green Day gave me that sense of escapism that made me feel like I was going through a time capsule of some of the most popular trends of the 1990s. A time period that may or may not have been one of the coolest decades for pop culture. To put it simply, Green Day's music made me feel nostalgic for a decade I wasn't even alive to be a part of back then. At the end of the day, I think we all need a little nostalgia every now and then. Even if Hollywood tends to shove a little too much nostalgia down our throats, and even when music tends to rely a little too much on popular hits of the past to evoke nostalgia from listeners, nostalgia is an important aspect to our pop culture, as a way of reminding us where we came from and when we felt the most alive. And so, despite everything, I still consider Dookie to be one of my favorite albums of all time, even to the point where I own a vinyl copy of that album, plus this t-shirt I got for Christmas that has the album cover on it. It's an album that holds a lot of special value in my life, especially because it was one of the very first albums I got into growing up, and made me realize that rock probably might be my favorite genre. It's an album that reminds us of the importance of nostalgia in our lives, and learning that sometimes we shouldn't be taking life so seriously. Have fun like nothing matters. That's pretty much the main message of this album, at least in my opinion. All this and more are why I love Green Day's Dookie. Oh yeah! And this song exists. Right. This is All By Myself, a hidden track that shows up at the end of the album. And it's about Trey Cool masturbating. What?